When they reached his cabin, Hermione turned automatically left towards the front door. Hagrid, however, walked straight past it in the shade of the trees on the outermost edge of the forest, where he picked up a crossbow that was leaning against a tree. When he realised they were no longer with him, he turned. "We're going in here," he said, jerking his shaggy head behind him. "Into the forest?" said Hermione, perplexed.
"Yeah,"
said Hagrid.
"Come on now, quick, before we're spied."
Harry and Hermione looked at each other, then ducked into the cover of the trees behind Hagrid, who was already striding away from them into the green gloom, his crossbow over his arm. Harry and Hermione ran to catch up with him. "Hagrid, why are you armed?" said Harry.
"Oh, it's just a precaution,"
said Hagrid, shrugging his massive shoulders. "You didn't bring your crossbow the day you showed us the Thestrals," said Hermione, timidly.
"Now, well, we weren't going in so far then,"
said Hagrid.
"Anyway, that was before Firenze left the forest, wasn't it?"
"Why does Firenze leaving make a difference?" asked Hermione, curiously.
They used to be, well, you wouldn't call them friendly, but we got on all right. Kept themselves, but always turned up if I wanted a word. Not anymore."
He sighed deeply. "Firenze said they were angry because he went to her for Dumbledore," Harry asked, tripping on a protruding root because he was busy watching Hagrid's profile.
"Yeah,"
said Hagrid heavily.
"Well, angry doesn't cover it. Ruddy livid. If I hadn't stepped in, I reckon they'd have kicked Firenze to death."
"They attacked him?" said Hermione, sounding shocked.
"Yeah,"
said Hagrid, gruffly, forcing his way through several low-hanging branches.
"He had half the herd onto him."
"And you stopped it?" said Harry, amazed and impressed. "By yourself?"
"Of course I did. Couldn't stand by and watch them kill him, could I?"
said Hagrid.
"Lucky I was passing, really, and I'd have thought Firenze might remember that before he started sending me stupid warnings,"
he added hotly and unexpectedly. Harry and Hermione looked at each other, startled, but Hagrid, scowling, did not elaborate.
"Anyway,"
he said, breathing a little more heavily than usual,
"since then, the other centaur's been living with me. Trouble is, they've got a lot of influence in the forest. Cleverest creatures in here."
"Is that why we're here, Hagrid?" asked Hermione. "The centaurs?"
No,"
said Hagrid, shaking his head dismissively.
"No, it's not them. Well, of course, they could complicate the problem, yeah, but you'll see what I mean in a bit."
On this incomprehensible note, he fell silent and forged a little ahead, taking one stride for every 3 of theirs, so that they had great trouble keeping up with him. The path was becoming increasingly overgrown, and the trees grew so closely together as they walked farther and farther into the forest that it was as dark as dusk. They were soon a long way past the clearing where Hagrid had shown them the Thestrals, but Harry felt no sense of unease until Hagrid stepped unexpectedly off the path and began wending his way in and out of trees towards the dark heart of the forest. "Hagrid," said Harry, fighting his way through thickly knotted brambles, over which Hagrid had stepped easily, and remembering very vividly what had happened to him on the other occasion he'd stepped off the forest path. "Where are we going?"
"Bit further,"
said Hagrid over his shoulder.
"Come on, Harry, we need to keep together now."
It was a great struggle to keep up with Hagrid, what with branches and thickets of thorn, through which Hagrid marched as easily as though they were cobwebs, but which snagged Harry and Hermione's robes, frequently entangling them so severely they had to stop for minutes at a time to free themselves. Harry's arms and legs were soon covered in small cuts and scratches. They were so deep in the forest now that sometimes all Harry could see of Hagrid in the gloom was a massive dark shape ahead of him. Any sound seemed threatening in the muffled silence. The breaking of a twig echoed loudly, and the tiniest rustle of movement, though it might have been made by an innocent sparrow, caused Harry to peer through the gloom for a culprit. It occurred to him that he'd never managed to get this far into the forest without meeting some kind of creature. Their absence struck him as rather ominous. "Hagrid, would it be all right if we lit our wands?" said Hermione quietly.
All right,"
Hagrid whispered back.
"In fact—"
He stopped suddenly and turned around. Hermione walked right into him and was knocked over backwards. Harry caught her just before she hit the forest floor.
"Maybe we best just stop for a moment, so I can fill you in," said Hagrid, "before we go there, like."
"Good," said Hermione, as Harry set her back on her feet. They both murmured Lumos, and their wand tips ignited. Hagrid's face swam through the gloom by the light of the two wavering beams, and Harry saw he looked nervous and sad again.
"Right," said Hagrid. "Well, see, the thing is..."
He took a great breath.
"Well, there's a good chance I'm going to be getting sacked any day now," he said.
Harry and Hermione looked at each other, then back at him.
"But you've lasted this long,"
Hermione said, tentatively.
"What makes you think—"
"Umbridge reckons it was me to put that niffler in her office."
"And was it?" said Harry, before he could stop himself.
"No, it really well wasn't,"
said Hagrid, indignantly.
"Only anything to do with magical creatures, and she thinks it's got something to do with me. You know she's been looking for a chance to get rid of me ever since I got back. I don't want to go, of course, but if it weren't for, well, the special circumstances I'm about to explain to you, I'd leave right now, before she got a chance to do it in front of the old school, like she did with Trelawney."
Harry and Hermione both made noises of protest, but Hagrid overrode them with a wave of one of his enormous hands.
"It's not the end of the world. I'll be able to help Dumbledore once I'm out of here. I can be useful in the Order. And you lot, well, you'll have Grobbly Plank. You'll get through your exams fine."
His voice trembled and broke.
"Don't worry about me,"
he said hastily, as Hermione made to pat him on his arm. He pulled his enormous spotted handkerchief from the pocket of his waistcoat and mopped his eyes with it.
"Look, I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't have to, see? If I go, well, I can leave without telling someone, because I'll need you two to help me, and Ron if he's willing."
"Of course we'll help you," said Harry at once. "What do you want us to do?" Hagrid gave a great sniff and patted Harry wordlessly on the shoulder with such force that Harry was knocked sideways into a tree.
"I knew you'd say yes,"
said Hagrid into his handkerchief.
"But I won't never forget. Well, come on, just a little bit further through here. Watch yourselves now. There's Nettles."
They walked on in silence for another 15 minutes. Harry had opened his mouth to ask how much farther they got to go, when Hagrid threw out his right arm to signal they should stop.
"Really easy," he said softly. "Very quiet now."
They crept forward, and Harry saw they were facing a large, smooth mound of earth, nearly as tall as Hagrid, that he thought, with a jolt of dread, was sure to be the lair of some enormous animal. Trees had been ripped up at the roots all around the mound, so it stood on a bare patch of ground surrounded by heaps of trunks and boughs that formed a kind of fence or barricade, behind which Harry, Hermione and Hagrid now stood.
"Sleeping,"
breathed Hagrid. Sure enough, Harry could hear a distant, rhythmic rumbling that sounded like a pair of enormous lungs at work. He glanced sideways at Hermione, who was gazing at the mound with her mouth slightly open. She looked utterly terrified.
"Hagrid,"
she said, in a whisper barely audible over the sound of the sleeping creature.
"Who is he?"
Harry found this an odd question. "What is it?" was the one he'd been planning on asking.
"Hagrid, you told us,"
said Hermione, her wand now shaking in her hand.
"You told us none of them wanted to come."
Harry looked from her to Hagrid, and then, as realization hit him, he looked back at the mound with a small gasp of horror. The great mound of earth on which he, Hermione and Hagrid could easily have stood was moving slowly up and down in time with the deep grunting breathing. It was not a mound at all. It was the curved back of what was clearly—
"Well, no, he didn't want to come,"
said Hagrid, sounding desperate.
"But I had to bring him, Hermione. I had to."
"But why?"
asked Hermione, who sounded as though she wanted to cry.
"Why? Oh, Hagrid!"
"I knew if I just got him back,
said Hagrid, sounding close to tears himself.
"And taught him a few manners, I'd be able to take him outside and show everyone he's harmless."
Harmless? Said Hermione shrilly, and Hagrid made frantic hushing noises with his hands as the enormous creature before them grunted loudly and shifted in its sleep. He's been hurting you all this time, hasn't he? That's why you've had all these injuries.
"Oh, he don't know his own strength,"
said Hagrid earnestly.
"And he's getting better. He's not fighting so much anymore."
So this is why it took you 2 months to get home, said Hermione. Oh, Hagrid, why did you bring it back if he didn't want to come? Wouldn't he have been happier with his own people?
"They were all bullying him, Hermione, because he's so small,"
said Hagrid. Small? Said Hermione. Small?
"Hermione, I couldn't leave him,"
said Hagrid, tears now trickling down his bruised face into his beard.
"See, he's my brother."
Hermione simply stared at him, her mouth open. Hagrid, when you say brother, said Harry slowly, do you mean...
"Well, half-brother,"
amended Hagrid.
"Turns out me mother took up another giant when she left me dad. She went and had Grawp here."
Grawp? Said Harry.
"Yeah, well, that's what it sounds like when he says his name,"
said Hagrid, anxiously.
"He don't speak a lot of English. Been trying to teach him. Anyway, she don't seem to have liked him much more she liked me. See, with giantesses, what counts is producing good big kids. He's always been a bit on the runty side, for a giant. Only 16 foot.
Oh yes, tiny, said Hermione, with a kind of hysterical sarcasm. Absolutely minuscule.
He was being kicked around by all of them. I just couldn't leave him."
Did Madame Maxime want to bring him back? Asked Harry.
She could see it was right important to me,"
said Hagrid, twisting his enormous hands.
But she got a bit tired of him after a while, I must admit. So we split up on the journey home. She promised not to tell anyone, though.
How on earth did you get him back without anyone noticing? Said Harry.
"Well, that's why it took so long, see?"
said Hagrid.
"I only travelled by night and through wild country and stuff. Of course, he covers the ground pretty well when he wants to, but he keeps wanting to go back."
Oh, Hagrid, why on earth didn't you let him? Said Hermione, flopping down onto a ripped-up tree and burying her face in her hands. What do you think we're going to do with a violent giant who doesn't even want to be here?
"Well now, violent, that's a bit harsh,"
said Hagrid, still twisting his hands agitatedly.
"I'll admit he might take a couple of swings at me when he's in a bad mood, but he's getting better. Loads better. Settling down well."
What are those ropes for then? Harry asked. He just noticed ropes thick as saplings stretching from around the trunks of the largest nearby trees, towards the place where Grawp lay curled on the ground with his back to them. You have to keep him tied up, said Hermione faintly.
"Well, yeah,"
said Hagrid, looking anxious.
"See, it's like I say, he doesn't really know his strength."
Harry understood why there had been such a suspicious lack of any other living creature in this part of the forest. So, what is it you want Harry and Ron and me to do? Hermione asked, apprehensively.
"Look after him,"
said Hagrid croakily.
"After I'm gone."
Harry and Hermione exchanged miserable looks. Harry uncomfortably aware that he'd already promised Hagrid he would do whatever he asked. What does that involve, exactly? Hermione inquired.
"Not food or anything,"
said Hagrid eagerly.
"He can get his own food, no problem. Birds and deer and stuff. No, it's company he needs. I just knew someone was carrying on, trying to help him a bit, teaching him.
Harry said nothing, but turned to look back at the gigantic form lying asleep on the ground in front of them. Grawp had his back to them. Unlike Hagrid, who simply looked like a very oversized human, Grawp looked strangely misshapen. What Harry had taken to be a vast, mossy boulder to the left of the great earthen mound, he now recognised as Grawp's head. It was much larger in proportion to the body than a human head, almost perfectly round, and covered with tightly curling close-growing hair, the colour of bracken. The rim of a single large fleshy ear was visible on top of the head, which seemed to sit rather like Uncle Vernon's, directly upon the shoulders, with little or no neck in between. The back, under what looked like a dirty brownish smock comprised of animal skins sewn roughly together, was very broad, and as Grawp slept, it seemed to strain a little at the rough seams of his skins. The legs were curled up under the body. Harry could see the soles of enormous, filthy bare feet, large as sledges, resting one on top of the other on the earthy forest floor.
You want us to teach him?
Harry said in a hollow voice. He now understood what Firen's warning had meant. His attempt is not working. He would do better to abandon it. Of course, the other creatures who lived in the forest would have heard Hagrid's fruitless attempts to teach Grawp English.
Yeah, even if it's just to talk to him for a bit, said Hagrid, hopefully. Because I reckon if he can talk to people, he'll understand more that we all like him, really, and want him to stay.
Harry looked at Hermione, who peered back at him from between the fingers over her face. Kind of makes you wish we had Norbert back, doesn't it? He said. Then she gave a very shaky laugh.
You'll do it then?
Said Hagrid, who did not seem to have caught what Harry had just said. We'll, said Harry, already bound by his promise. We'll try, Hagrid,